Welcome to She Trusts Herself, the podcast for women who are learning to trust themselves, honour their inner voice, and choose themselves without guilt. I'm your host, Tash, Leam, author, guest speaker, and certified human design reader. Together, we'll explore overcoming self-doubt, building deep self-trust, personal growth, and stepping into the next version of yourself with confidence. Welcome back to another episode. Today, I am joined by the incredible Steph from Haze Counselling. Steph is a clinical counsellor and the owner of Haze Counselling. Steph works with people through what she calls life's hazy moments where you feel stuck, confused, and overwhelmed. Steph believes that connection is the key to providing clarity and wisdom for her clients. Steph, I'm so glad that you're here. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I'd love to kick off our chat with talking about your women's anxiety groups. And I'd love to know, how are they going this year?
Totally. Thanks so much for having me, Tash. And it's a great opportunity to talk about these groups because on socials, I post about them all the time. There's a lot of curiosity about them, but not everyone knows what actually happens in my groups. I've been running these groups for women across this year, 2026. I originally started by hosting some women's anxiety workshops last year because I noticed a real pattern in my clinical work. I noticed that there are so many women who are struggling with anxiety in their daily life, in their relationships. And I thought, what better way than to actually bring them all together? I was hearing the same kind of things over and over again in sessions, women saying, I feel alone in my anxiety. I feel like I'm the only one spiraling at 3 a.m. And that was just not the truth. In my groups this year, I've seen so much transformation. Women coming in with an acknowledgement of their patterns, knowing they've been stuck for a while, but just not knowing where to go, and coming out the other end of that after 6 weeks, feeling really empowered, feeling this sense of, oh, actually, I'm not the only one. Other people experience the exact same things as me, and having a framework that they can now use to feel more confident, to feel more secure, and to manage their anxiety ongoing, which has just been incredible to be a part of. And it's a huge part of my work that I just feel so proud of.
I love that so much. And I think that's so beautiful that you've created that from noticing a pattern, which just reflects how much you genuinely care and listen to your clients, and to hold that space for them and go, okay, I can see something that's missing. And it's so true, because with anxiety, you can really feel quite alone. It can feel really isolating and as if you're the only person. So you don't want to talk about it, but having that group environment and that space where you can all support each other would be so incredible. And the fact that you've seen such a transformation in your clients within 6 weeks, I mean, that's incredible considering how long they may have been carrying that on their own for as well.
Yeah. And I mean, we work on these things in individual therapy, but I think it's just so different. And in my mind, what I've seen is that that transformation is actually sped up because you are showing up every single week for literally just an hour and a half, and you're showing up with other people who are going through the same things as you. And that keeps you accountable to actually start putting those things in place. I think in individual therapy, lots of things get in the way. Lots of things happen outside the therapy room that can really stagnate that transformation. And the 6 weeks of actually just showing up to the group, I think really speeds up that process.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's really cool that you get that variety too, even for yourself as a counselor, to have the one-on-one sessions and then to have a break from that and do that group session too. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but the group sessions would maybe give you an opportunity to hear what's working for other people, and then you can help more people at once too.
Yes, definitely. It is great to have some variation. Being in a room with the door closed constantly for several hours a day every week is taxing, yeah, to say the least. So I think it's really great to do more in a sustainable way.
I love that. That's fantastic to hear. Do you have any other projects coming up?
I do actually. I've hinted at a couple of things. I tend to notice these patterns and do things about them. Is that I've got a lot of followers on Instagram who are also therapists or are students who are training to become counselors or psychologists. And they often reach out to me. I get about 4 messages a month from different people who are asking me questions like, how do you judge your practice in social media? What did you study? How do you get into private practice? All those kind of ins and outs. I started thinking I take a lot of time responding to these messages, but it would actually be more beneficial if I created something for this audience. So I do have something in the pipeline there, which I won't reveal everything now, but there will be something coming at the end of the year for those therapists who have been following me on socials, just more around building on my anxiety groups. So looking at running groups, running further groups around maintenance sessions, around being able to check in around all of those skills and using that framework and building on what I've started.
That is amazing and really cool that you are noticing those patterns. The fact that people are reaching out to you and asking those questions is confirmation, not that we need it from other people, but it's always a nice cherry on top to know that you're doing something that's a bit different in your space and others are thinking, oh, this looks really cool. Like, how do you balance it all? And I know looking at your content and following you on social media, it's really cool to see the variance in content that you have, and you constantly have ideas, and to have that space to be creative and constantly come up with new content that resonates deeply with your clients and people that are new to your world, and also hold that space in sessions, whether it's the group or behind closed doors in your one-on-ones. That's a really impressive skill. Have you ever found that you've reached a point where you maybe just get tired and you're like, I just need a break from everything, or maybe just like a part of it?
Totally. I've definitely experienced that state of burnout. I think it's a real struggle because I feel like I'm quite a creative person. So I'm always coming up with new ideas and wanting to do all the things, but also noticing that my body can't always keep up with that. And I can't just be doing something every single day. It is a fine line. And I think, especially doing things like collaborations with people, I've got a list of things that I want to do and that I would love to do. And yet at the same time, my body just can't show up that much in this short space of time. So I think just learning how to pace myself has been good.
It's one of those things that really sucks when you have to learn that the hard way, having to go through burnout. It really humbles you in a way that you would rather just not, but it's really good that you've learned from that and realizing, like, yes, you can still do things even if it takes a little bit longer. That is frustrating in itself sometimes, when you just go, I have all of these great ideas, I want to bring them all to life right now. But trusting yourself enough to know, okay, I have these ideas, I know that I can get them and bring them to life. It's just doing it gradually and in a way that feels sustainable, so I can still show up for myself, for my clients, on social media, all of the things, wear all of the hats that we need to these days. And I'm really glad that hopefully you're through the worst of it now and you're feeling better.
Yes, definitely. I think it was a couple of months ago, I was feeling just that real fatigue, not being able to get through a day without feeling like I could just take a nap any second, and being able to just get on top of my health and taking like even things like B12 has been really beneficial. And yeah, just noticing the real difference of pacing myself and stepping back.
That's amazing. And getting reacquainted with yourself again. I think even though we have the framework and the tools there, we sometimes forget to use it ourselves. We're really good at making sure our clients know and making sure they're empowered and have that framework in place that will help them. And sometimes we neglect ourselves, not from a martyr perspective. It's just we've got so much going on that we just forget that.
Yes, definitely.
Now that you're through the thick of it, is there a value that at the forefront of your mind at the moment, or you're trying to live your life by?
Yeah, I feel authenticity comes to mind, but I think also family. A big shift for me is the life stage that I'm in at the moment. Just being able to try and find a way to spend more time around my family, spend more time with my partner, not working late nights, and being able to just set those boundaries. And I feel I've been someone who has had really strong boundaries over time, and I'm always changing things and trying new things. And yet at the same time, I think there's been this real shift for me in wanting to spend even more time than I would normally with my family and wanting to appreciate life a little bit more as well. I think maybe that just comes with age.
Oh, that's great. And I think it's nice when you notice that your priorities are shifting, because I think that's a great reminder for everyone. You can set core values and priorities, but like plans, you don't have to stick to them, and is allowed to pivot and shift as you go through seasons of life. It's not to say family was never important for you or for anyone else, but sometimes that has to come. And whether that's a permanent shift or temporarily, depending on what's going on, it's okay to notice when things shift and creating those boundaries and changing your routine around to suit that. So it's fantastic you've been able to do that.
Yes, definitely. I think it's really helpful to step back. Things like birthdays, I think, are a real interesting time for a lot of people to bring up that sense of like endings of one year and going into the next. And I had my birthday within this last month. For me, it was a real shift in thinking about, oh, okay, so another year has gone by, and what do I want to do differently this year? What do I want more of?
Those are some fantastic questions to ask yourself, rather than thinking, oh, no, I haven't done X, Y, and Z, to be thinking about the future rather than shaming yourself or guilting yourself because you may not have done all of the things that you wanted to. Just thinking about what you want more or less of. It's never stagnant, and having to ask yourself those questions more frequently is definitely a good thing.
For sure.
So with that in mind, with your value and changing your work hours to prioritize your relationships and family, is there something that you're intentionally wanting to choose more of this year?
Yeah. So I think something that I intentionally doing is investing more in my professional identity and my brand more so that I can actually live a life of freedom that is sort of more aligned with my values. So I can spend more time with my family so that I can nurture my relationships. One of the things that I have done even just this week in thinking about the next financial year is I have signed up with a business coach, which I've never done before. I've sort of just done things on my own and I felt like things are going pretty well, but just to elevate things to this next stage and to just refine everything with my professional identity, with my brand and how I show up. I think that's a great way to nurture my business, but also then to just nurture what I actually want to focus on.
Yeah, that's amazing. And again, it's having that support and having someone else that's outside of the business looking at it and being open to that feedback and thinking, how can I potentially streamline things or make my business work around the life that I'm wanting to build, rather than feeling like I'm a slave to my business? Because I think most of us have been there at some point, and it makes you want to throw your business in the bin, even though that's not what you really want to do. But it's just because it's not working around your schedule. There's like a friction point somewhere. So that's really exciting and very awesome. And yeah, just a great reminder that we all evolve and level up. And sometimes getting someone else external, even when you think things are going good or great, is an awesome thing to do, because sometimes we get stuck at the cusp of something and we don't necessarily know it. And having someone else to be like, oh, have you tried this, and refine it and maybe make something more automated or have a system in place, and it just makes life a lot easier too.
Yes, definitely. My eyes were very much opened. And I think this is something that I'm really passionate about as well, is supporting people to identify their blind spot. I think that's why, like you said, having a third person there to listen and to challenge you and point out some things that might be some blind spots for you, I find that so invaluable, because it's something that we can never do ourselves. We can't identify all of those blind spots.
Yeah, for sure. Being open to that too and receptive is challenging at first, but when you can be, I think that's where the gold is, where you have those moments where you go, I didn't even think of that. And like you said, it's because of the blind spot. You don't know what you don't know.
Yes, exactly.
Something that I'd love to talk to you about, is there a habit or a ritual that supports your mental health?
Yes. I mean, I've got lots of rituals that I talk about with clients. I often talk about the difference between routines and rituals. And I think that you might have spoken about that on one of your podcast episodes as well. I remember you talking about it and it really resonated with me. For me, knowing my triggers really well is super helpful. And I find that I know my situations where I'm going to become potentially flooded or I'm going to feel overstimulated. And just being able to identify that and plan for what to do when those moments show up is really beneficial. I feel like that's a huge stuck point for a lot of my clients as well, is that they don't even know what being flooded means, right? So when you're flooded, you can't function the same way that you would usually. You can't make good decisions. You can't problem solve. You can't regulate your emotions. And all of those things are so important for you to be able to make decisions and to move through life. And if you constantly find yourself feeling that way, feeling stuck, feeling unsure about how to get out of that, then it's probably likely that you're getting flooded. It's helpful to know how to deal with that. So for me, when I get flooded, it's recognizing my triggers when I could potentially get flooded, but then when it happens, having ways of communicating that to the people closest to me so that I don't just shut down or withdraw, or so that I don't just react or try to overcompensate in some kind of way. And learning how to do that has just been really pivotal for me.
That's huge. And it's having that self-awareness. And sometimes when we're in the thick of it, we can't catch ourselves. And it takes a whole lot of self-compassion in those moments to know that you're a human, not a robot. So you may catch yourself, say, 70% of the time, but that's still such a huge increase from 0%. And knowing your triggers, I think that's a self-compassion piece, because it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you or you've got weaknesses. It's just knowing what's going to set you off. And can you either avoid it, or how can you navigate it in a way that you said that's not going to leave you flooded? And it's that self preservation piece, knowing your triggers and having those processes in place. And the communication is boundaries, something that's really helpful for you, whether it's, say, a short-term boundary because you know that you've got a really full schedule coming up, or maybe it's a boundary that has to change permanently.
Yeah, definitely. If I think about a particular situation where I might feel overstimulated, which comes up a lot with the fact that I have ADHD. I'm that combined type of inattentive and hyperactive, and those pieces come up at different times as well. An example of that would be if I find myself in a situation where there's a lot of people and it's quite noisy, it's quite loud, there's a lot going on. I find it really difficult to just be where I am and to be regulated and present. And I have a code word with my partners. I use the phrase, and basically, if I am feeling overwhelmed, I will often give him a look and he kind of knows that it's time, or he will ask me. That means it's like, okay, time out. Like, and we're going to go and stand somewhere else and just try to communicate with him and just focus on where I'm at and settle my nervous system rather than feeling completely flooded and not being able to cope in that moment.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's really amazing. And to have a partner that acknowledges that too, where you feel safe enough that you can have that code word and they can bring you back to that moment, is super important. I'd say for a lot of us, that kind of environment is really overwhelming. It's just so much for all of your senses. And being able to know, okay, it's just getting to that point where it's too much, and being able to self-regulate, that's huge. And then having someone that can take you out of that without you having to over explain yourself or justify why you need a break too is really, really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think it comes from that understanding of, one of my favorite questions, particularly for couples, is what do you need? So if someone is feeling overwhelmed, being able to say, what is it that you need right now? It's a hard question to answer if you're feeling flooded or overwhelmed, but over time we get to know our needs and then we get to know our triggers, like I was saying. So in that particular situation, that code word means this thing, but then some other situation, it might be a different kind of tool.
Yeah, I love that you do couples therapy as well. Is that something that you've been doing for a while?
I've been doing it for a while. I trained in couples therapy. I was very lucky in my master's of counselling and psychotherapy to have lecturers who had over 20 years experience with couples. So we did a lot of couples training and a lot of classes around that. And I found it really exciting to work with couples. A lot of people find it quite overwhelming, or I don't want to go near that. But I found it really interesting. And I think it's just another way to support people in terms of their relationships. And that's really something that I'm passionate about. So if I can support people in that way as well, then that's definitely something that I would do.
Yeah, that's amazing. I feel I'm noticing a theme where you want to help people with their relationships, whether it's relationship with self, relationship with managing anxiety, or relationship with their significant other or other people in their life. And what an amazing thing to help people with.
Yeah, I think relationships is the key theme as much as a lot of people think that I focus on anxiety. I think anxiety underpins relationships, but relationships are what foster our growth. Having those healthy connections allows us to have healthy growth in a lot of areas in our lives. I came from a background where I had certain relationships that weren't healthy, and that really stunted my growth, and being able to recognize that and then see that as a key thing that actually is relatable for everyone who walks into my counseling space. It's just so significant. Even if someone is walking in saying they have grief or they have depression or OCD or whatever it is, it all links back to relationships. So I've just found that to be the gold nugget, I guess, of therapy.
That's incredible and definitely true, because it's that connection piece. Even if people are reaching out to you for help, again, that's a relationship that they're wanting to build or discover because they know that they can't do it by themselves. I don't mean that they're incapable, but sometimes we all reach a point where we go, okay, we need to seek help from someone else, whether it's advice, whether it's professional therapy, whatever the case may be. I mean, I've been through therapy recently as well and absolutely found it beneficial, just getting out of your own head and being able to communicate with someone. And sometimes we are in a point in our life where maybe we're constantly using the same person to put all of our problems and thoughts on, and we don't want to use them as the dumping ground or the punching bag. And so we want to find someone else, and maybe we don't have those other relationships in our life where we feel that we can be that open and vulnerable. And that's where therapy is a beautiful option to look at, because you've got someone that will provide that supportive space for you and have those conversations and help you see things with a little bit more clarity, especially if you come in and you're feeling flooded. Even though you want to think clearly, you just can't, because your brain's capacity and cannot do anything else.
Yes, definitely. I think it's much more common than we realize. And a lot of people are carrying that experience. And I think that is something so important to just be able to recognize that if you're listening to this right now and you think, wow, that's me, maybe I'm flooded, then it'd be great to have a conversation about it.
I guess with being flooded, is there one piece of advice that you could offer someone to acknowledge it about themselves? Maybe they think they're overthinking or they're being too high maintenance or something like that. And they think, oh, no, I'm fine. I'll just push through like I have the 1,000 other times before. Is there something that you would say to them to comfort them or give them like a piece of advice to help them know that it's okay?
Yeah. One of the things I would say about being flooded is that if you feel like that's just how your brain works and that's normal, then in a way, yes, it is how your brain is adapting to the situation and that is normal. But it's not something that is sustainable. If you are constantly in a state of feeling flooded or feeling overwhelmed and you just feel like things are really foggy, then that's not a way to live. There are ways around that. I would say the first thing is just to recognize that it's impacting your functioning. If anything is impacting your functioning, whether it's like an actual physical injury to one of your body parts or being able to breathe properly, if you've got a cold or a flu, and even feeling flooded, like this is another way that your functioning is being impacted, and therefore you need to take it seriously. Feeling flooded over time does mean that we are suppressing our emotions. And when we suppress our emotions, we know evidence shows us that that leads to things like autoimmune diseases, chronic illness, all these kinds of things. So if you can, even in the moment, just acknowledge that that is happening for you and give yourself permission to step away and to pause, even if you don't know how to regulate it yet, just being able to pause, I think is a really good tool just to begin with.
Wow. Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that golden nugget with our listeners. I want to take it back a step because I just absolutely love the answers that you were sharing, but I don't want to gloss over this where you were sharing so openly about having ADHD. And I'm just curious if you're open to sharing about it. Did you get diagnosed with ADHD earlier in life, or is it something that you got diagnosed with as an adult?
So I was late diagnosed. So I was an adult, I was in my mid-20s. And so for me, that process was something that I did myself. So I took that upon myself to go to ADHD WA, which I would highly recommend, by the way. So they did a cognitive test, an IQ test, and all these other surveys and a clinical interview. And for me, I wanted that approach rather than seeing a psychiatrist who I could easily list the symptoms off to them of ADHD and get a diagnosis. But I just wanted that confirmation that my brain was functioning in a very different way. For a long time, I struggled with things like anxiety and depression, and it was quite intermittent. And this is where I think comorbidity comes in. It's really difficult to tease out. Do you have anxiety? Do you have OCD, depression? What's actually going on? As many women do who are neurodivergent, I learned how to mask what I was actually experiencing with a lot of different behaviors. So I was high achieving. I, put myself into all these extra things at school. I was signed up to absolutely everything. I was just in that perfectionist type mode. Inevitably, I would just burn out and would just crack under pressure, and it was just too much. And over the years, I supported people who are also neurodivergent, and a part of me always felt like something was going on or something different was there, and just bit the bullet and went and got diagnosed in the end.
Thank you for sharing. Once you went through that process and you received your diagnosis, did it feel validating in the sense that you found out that there was something you thought was there and it wasn't just in your head? How did you feel once you had that process completed?
Yeah, I honestly felt so much relief. I felt relieved that I had finally, not so much about the label for me. For a lot of people, it's a label, but for me, it was actually just being able to show more compassion. And in those moments around being overstimulated or being a bit sensitive about certain sensory things, instead of calling myself sensitive as I had since I was a little girl, I started to recognize I'm not sensitive. This is just how I operate. And some things I don't feel comfortable with, some things I do. And I just have to learn how to make adjustments. So for me, particularly working in the industry of therapy, I think labels can be very beneficial, but it wasn't the label that changed things for me. It was that experience of, oh, I need to be more kind to myself. I've been trying to operate in a perfectionistic way and feeling like I'm not good enough and I'm sensitive and what's wrong with me. And actually, nothing was wrong with me. It's just that I had to find a different way of living life.
That's really cool. And I agree with you on the labels, and without wanting to put words in your mouth, just the way that you were talking about it, it's more so that permission piece where you could be practicing self-acceptance and also self-compassion, where, like you were saying, you put those labels on yourself and be like, oh, I'm too sensitive, I'm too this, I'm too that, and wondering what's wrong with you. And just hearing that just crushes my heart, because I know that that's not a unique experience, which sucks. And just knowing that, going through that process and knowing that, like you said, it's just about finding a different pathway and navigating things differently. And it doesn't mean that it's going to sound like ChatGPT, but you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just you're operating in a different way. I'm really glad that you've had that experience, and hopefully that's helped you with boundaries and everything that you need to support yourself. And I think it's a good reminder for people listening too, being neurodivergent doesn't limit you from career options, from building a business or having the life that you want. It's just incorporating that into your life as a whole. And it doesn't have to restrict what you do.
Yeah, exactly. It's about building the right systems. And the other thing that often resonates with a lot of people is understanding that RSD component. So that of rejection sensitive dysphoria, like being really sensitive to rejection, because I feel lots of us can experience RSD regardless of whether we're neurodivergent or not. But often neurodivergent people do, because we have grown up masking and we have grown up telling ourselves those things we start to believe. And I think it's really helpful to just even recognize that we might react or we might become flooded in certain moments because we feel that rejection sensitivity in the moment.
That's a really good way of looking at it too. And sometimes it can feel with the rejection, you feel like you're really sensitive to it or hyper aware of it. And it's like, oh, no one wants to work with me. No one wants to hang out, whatever the case may be. And it's just knowing that your brain's more prone to feeling that way. And again, nothing wrong with you. It's just that hypersensation or fixation on it.
Yes, exactly.
I've absolutely loved our chat so far. A little bit of another backpedal because you've got so much knowledge and there's so many questions I could ask you. I'd love to go back to relationships because I feel that that's a core theme underpinning all of the work that you do. With the work that you do one-on-one with your groups and also in couples therapy, is there anything that you do outside of work that mirrors what you teach your clients, or do you navigate your relationships differently? Has it taught you anything that you now implement?
Yeah, totally. I think because relationships are a huge part of what I value and also in my work, it's hard not to have some kind of thinking around that and applying those things to myself. I'm probably known in my friendships as the person who like brings people together. So I'm the friend who will reach out and whatnot. But I do that in a sustainable way where I will have a time every couple of weeks and I'll reach out to my friends or I'll send voice messages and I'll just check in and I will often just create ways for us to hang out rather than speaking over messaging because I know that's not a strength. And so I put a lot of emphasis on face to face value and being able to connect. I think it's really important in my work, but I also see that mirrored in my relationships as well. I don't spend a lot of time messaging anyone. It's all about that sort of face to face quality time. In my relationship, I'm very transparent about being able to give space to my relationship and give space to my work and being really intentional about what that looks like. Some nights I'll come home and I'm like, okay, I'm going to sit in the shower because I've had a really long day. And that's my way of washing the day off and being able to communicate that really clearly with him. And we have different ways that we'll manage how we're feeling throughout the week. So I'm very transparent with people like friends, family, all of them about not talking about work, but talking about the impact of that because we often don't talk about the impact of this kind of work on our nervous system. And that's something that I really want more therapists to talk about and that I'm going to be including in an offering for therapists soon because the impact is huge. And if you feel like you're not being impacted, then there's some curiosity about like, what does that work actually look like for you? I think there's a way to sustain depth in the work that you do while also not losing yourself. Part of that is just about being really authentic. That's a key piece for me in the work that I do and the way that I try to show up on socials is I am myself. And if I can do that, that's the way that I protect myself from burnout as well.
Honestly, I really love that. And it's so true because there are jobs that are incredibly emotionally taxing. And the work that you do is invaluable to people. Being able to hold that space to actively listen and to provide that support and make them feel heard, seen, and understood is huge. That takes a lot on you. And I don't think that there's a way that you can necessarily sit there, whether it's in a group setting, couples therapy, or one on one, and completely disengage and be desensitized to it. Having those rituals like washing off your day, literally, and being able to communicate, I just need some time to decompress is really good. And knowing that people understand that it's not personal, being able to communicate your needs and feeling like it's safe to do so is really important too, rather than, as you were saying earlier in the episode, completely shutting down. And like you were saying, not talking about the work, especially when the work that you do is confidential, but talking about the impact that it has on you. Do you find people sometimes reach out to you, whether it's on social media or just in face-to-face conversations, to solicit your professional advice without booking you?
Yeah, it happens sometimes. Sometimes my friends will say, hey, can I get the therapist version of Steph on this? Can you give me some advice? And I'll say to them, ethically, I can't do that. But here's something that I find really helpful around the situation. Or have you tried this? Like, I read about this thing, or there's this tool that I use for myself. So instead of telling them what to do and giving them that direct advice, we'll sort of like chat about, okay, what could they find helpful?
That's such a good point. And have you always had a strong boundary around that, or was it challenging at first to set that boundary and making sure that you're not acting unethically?
Yeah, I think honestly, when you've got people who are close to you and they want your support and you do anything to support them, I think it's very easy to slip into going, oh, there's this and there's this. But what I've learned in having other people around me who have had difficulties with their mental health, and it's really common, for a lot of friends and family to go through that, is to say to them, you're not alone in that. And I understand it's really hard, and pointing them towards those professional services and saying, oh, I know this therapist and she's really great, or being able to have that access to resources to get them to reach out to those people rather than me going, oh, I'm going to bring you to this therapist, or I'm going to do this for you, which kind of takes away their sense of agency and autonomy. I think that's super important, just maintaining that and allowing people to take responsibility for themselves.
Yeah. And then it's still offering them that next step without you feeling as if you've breached your personal integrity or code of ethics. And it's also making sure that they feel like they've been heard by you too. I have no qualifications in the areas that you do. I have a Bachelor of Commerce and that's it. Just having people reaching out for advice, I imagine it would be hard trying to find that line sometimes. And especially when, like you said, with family and friends, you want to help them, but it's knowing that line, even just giving them like tips that you would otherwise if you're just having a general conversation and maybe didn't have the background and qualifications that you did.
Yeah, I feel it's also a common thing where I have clients come and they'll find therapy really helpful. And then they'll say, oh, can you see my mum? Or can you see my sister? And that's when things will become a conflict of interest. Being able to also see that as this is great that they found this helpful and they want to help other people. But I think it's really ethical to not see yourself as the option as well. As much as I have niched into relationships and anxiety, I'm not going to be the option for everyone. And as much as I'd love to help as much people as I can, not everyone is going to connect with me. Being able to also let people know that doesn't mean that that's going to work for someone else, and always referring on.
Yeah, I think that's really important and just goes back to knowing yourself and also that authenticity piece, which you've mentioned a few times in passing throughout the episode. With authenticity, how does that look for you in real life versus social media? Do you feel that there's a persona that you have online, or do you think it's the Steph you see online is who you get in real life?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really interesting to think about. I feel like authenticity for me, it's taken some time for me to feel like I can be completely authentic in all areas of my life, including at work and social media. Part of being a therapist is that it's assumed that we don't bring all parts of ourselves to the work. And obviously, the focus is on the client. But I've come to know that bringing humor and playfulness is actually what makes me feel like I'm being authentically me, and it's part of who I am. I'm often very playful with those who are close to me, and that's something that I feel really free in. There's something really freeing about being playful and going back to your roots. And I find that that's often really helpful for clients too, when I've got lots of women navigating relationship and dating anxiety and thinking, oh my goodness, how's this person texting me? Do they like me? What's going on here? Instead, helping them reframe to think, do I actually like this person? Am I interested in them? They don't even know me. I can bring a more playful version of myself there. I can play around with this. I don't have to be the version of myself that I have always been. There's something really fun about being able to be playful, and it also allows us to be more confident when we can be playful and we can make a joke. I often make lots of jokes in my sessions or be playful with clients because that lightens that feeling. It allows us to just exhale and not just be in that tightness and that anxiety all the time. I would say that's the main thing around authenticity for me, is its playfulness. Some of the aspects of social media and Instagram allow me to feel and show that playful side. But it's also that balance of not just being playful. Maybe I've shown some of that on socials, but I also feel like other people who view my socials would be better to comment on that too.
Well, I mean, as someone who has seen your socials, I love the balance that you have because I feel you have advice, you explain what you do, but then you also have those playful reels or carousel posts, like the one where you pop out of the cubby house. It makes a serious situation feel less heavy. And I don't think it's about downplaying what people are going through, but sometimes you just have to take that load off. Even just going and seeing a therapist that isn't sitting there super serious and you're able to walk in and feel at ease. I think that humor, playfulness, it eases the tension and it breaks down that wall where you go, okay, I can be myself because my therapist is, and I know that I can just be me. And leading with that is really cool. Is it something that you would say is common within your industry, or is something that's newer with our generation and beyond?
Yeah, I definitely say the latter. I feel so many therapists, particularly with the movement of social media, being able to communicate more and say, I'm not going to be a blank slate therapist. I'm going to have my feelings and all of those different things. And I think it is a newer thing. And being able to just say to your client sometimes, I feel proud of you. It was something that was really taboo when I was in my master's to say things like that. I feel like is really part of creating and co-creating with your clients an emotionally corrective experience. Like if someone has shared their struggles with other people in their life that haven't been receptive towards them or haven't responded in ways that they've needed, and someone shares that with you and they make some changes or start to do some things that are really difficult for them, you go, hey, I'm really proud of you for trying that thing. That is so emotionally corrective to be able to have a totally different experience. And those sorts of experiences really shape the way that we view ourselves and the way that we are in relationships. So I think that's such an important part of that therapeutic relationship is having those experiences. And if you can't have them with your therapist, who else are you going to have them with if you're not seeing that in your life?
That's such a good point. And I guess taking it back to coaches and mentors, then they will typically say, go you and be your hype person and
Yeah.
cheer you on. And I think that's really cool from a therapist perspective. You can hold that space for them. I know that we talk a lot about internal validation, and I believe that internal validation is the cake and then the cherry on top is external validation. But there are times in our life where we've been knocked down so low that we need that cherry on top first, being able to see people and support them in their growth and also cheer them on. And that's nice to know that progress is being made. Not knowing too much about the industry, but that was definitely a preconceived idea that I had, was that complete separation and that completely professional relationship where space will be held for you to outpour your feelings and explain what's going on and give updates. But there wasn't much that was coming back to you other than, have you tried this? Have you done that? Maybe a list of things to walk away with, like homework. But sometimes having that praise and just that acknowledgement of, I can see that you're doing hard things. This is growth. This is progress, is so important. I would suggest that it would really help your clients with their transformation and willingness to be an active participant and not just see therapy as something to check off their to-do list once a week. It's actually something that they may look forward to because it's like, oh my God, I can tell Steph that I've done X, Y, and Z this week and she's going to be proud of me. I'm excited. We can share that moment together.
Yes, definitely. I myself have seen lots of different therapists and tried lots of different types of therapy. I have also experienced the old school psychotherapist, psychoanalytic, the Freudian couch. I found that so jarring and so difficult compared to relational based therapy and humanistic therapy that is more centered around that relationship. I remember sharing some really difficult things and just seeing the therapist and no expression on their face and no tone of voice. And I thought, oh, this is really quite harmful. Like it felt harmful for me. I can understand the basics around it and the theory and all of that and the whole reason why they do it. But I felt that wasn't helpful for me because it wasn't something that I look forward to. So for me, just having my own different experiences of therapy, that really helps me figure out what kind of professional identity I want to have and how I want to show up for my clients in the room.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think it's potentially like any workplace or career that you have. If you're looking at, say, supervisors and managers, you take the good and the bad parts and you think, oh, I don't want to be like this, but I really like what this person does. And then you can build your own puzzle and structure the way that feels right for you, and not having to do something the old way just because that's what you get told to do. You can grow and change. I completely resonate with the jarring part. I went and saw a psychotherapist before I found another therapist whose method I preferred so much more. It's nice to know that there are different types of therapy out there. If a listener is hearing this, if you've spoken to someone and it hasn't resonated with you, maybe look at trying something else, because you're still allowed to receive help and maybe the person that you saw just doesn't gel with you. So I'd love to know, what is a mindset shift that has helped you navigate times where your mental health is maybe not in the optimal range?
Yeah, totally. Great question. So, one of the shifts that I have found really helpful myself, and I also find really helpful for my clients, is that when you're feeling like your mental health is not in a great space, you often are likely to fall into that all or nothing or black and white type thinking. And it's natural. For a lot of people who are neurodivergent as well, this can be very common, but it's something we can introduce a bit of like new perspective to be able to recognize that we might be falling into that all or nothing thinking or that black and white thinking can be a really helpful way to shift your mindset. If we are thinking like that, that's often what leads to that stuckness, feeling like, oh, I feel really terrible, nothing's getting better, nothing is making me feel good, I'm not enjoying the things that I used to enjoy. And that all or nothing, it's like always and never. I'm never going to get better. I'm always feeling like this. And that black and white thinking is so divisive. And what ends up happening is that we get stuck in the middle. So we have this internal conflict where a part of us feels one way and another part of us feels the other way. And we just can't get out of that. I often find that about 75% of my clients come in with some kind of internal conflict. And a lot of the dialogue around that is black and white or is all or nothing. So being able to just recognize that that might be a pattern for you and being able to ask those questions of like, okay, what else is there? If there's a possibility that I'm always going to feel this way, what else could possibly happen? Could it get better? Could something else come in that might be supportive or helpful? Does everyone feel this way about me? Or is it just this particular circumstance that this is showing up? That can be really helpful just to untangle that stuckness and not feel so set in our ways.
Absolutely incredible advice. And it's very hard when you are in that mindset and that frame of mind, because you don't feel like there's any way out of it. It's like you're just stuck in this hole and you're just digging and digging and digging. And then you need a break. And there's that internal conflict where you just stop, go, stop, go, stop, go. And it's really exhausting. I imagine that that would sometimes lead to feeling flooded because you've just expended so much energy trying to get out of something. It's like you're mentally bogged and you just don't know how to get out of it because you've got that tunnel vision and you just can't think or see clearly. If you are feeling like there is a decline in your mindset or mental health, is there something that you would do to be aware of it or catch it before it completely dips? Say you're feeling really good and then it's slumping down and maybe at 50%. Is there something that you would do before it drops even further to boost it back up again?
Yeah, definitely. I think this is where that burnout prevention comes in, or being able to recognize what is actually happening. I like to think about this idea of being on a treadmill. So it's like you're on a treadmill and all of a sudden the treadmill is speeding up without you realizing it and being in control of that. You're now running and all of a sudden things are kind of declining with your mental health. Thinking about those questions, and these might be really great to write down again. What is speeding up the treadmill? What is it that you can do to slow it down? And when is a good time to get off? It's not funniest home videos where you're flung off the treadmill. That's not a great time to get off at the point where you're fully burnt out. And that's why I think that's important what you said about that 50% decline. So the treadmill is speeding up. How is it speeding up? What is it that is precipitating that? And how can I slow it down? What would it feel like if it wasn't sped up like that? I think those are some good questions to ask, and then you can get some of those answers from there.
That's the first time I've heard the treadmill analogy, and I think that's absolutely brilliant because sometimes we don't realize that we're running at a faster pace, and it's a pace that we haven't set for ourselves until we get out of breath, or we just go, oh, why do I feel exhausted? And it's like, because we've been running at 100 miles per hour for the past week, and we haven't been aware of it because we've been spending time on our phone or just trying to survive and just go, okay, I've got 7 days of a sprint ahead of me and I just need to go day by day. And then by the end of it, you're just absolutely exhausted, or trying to find where the emergency off button is, knowing how to slow it back down, or even just being comfortable with setting your own pace. If we look at it from that perspective of setting your own pace, is that where you would suggest boundaries would be a good way of looking at it, or maybe more of like that self-awareness piece of just knowing what you need in that moment?
Yeah, I think boundaries is a great thing to look at, and particularly looking at that idea of responsibility. You are responsible for your own emotions, thoughts, behaviors. Other people are responsible for theirs. If you're constantly speeding up the treadmill by worrying so much about how other people think about you or worrying about how they feel, then you're taking away from checking in on yourself and being able to take responsibility for your mental health. So maybe you're not seeing that needs to be supported and you're focusing on other things.
Absolutely great piece of advice again. Just before we wrap up the episode, I would love to know if there's a piece of advice that you would love to give our listeners, or maybe there's a quote that's been in your head lately, just any one-liner that you feel like sharing. And I'm 100% putting you on the spot with this.
Oh, yeah, I love this. I actually said this quote at the end of my anxiety workshops last year. It's my favorite quote. It's by a psychotherapist and a theorist by the name of Carl Jung. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. So the idea is that you have to make those things that are unconsciously driving you to do the things that you're doing or that you're having difficulty with, you have to make them conscious to understand them, so that you don't just feel like you're on a ride and it's taking you where it wants to go and you have no control over that.
Wow, love it. And I feel that that ties in really nicely with the treadmill metaphor too. Whereas if you're unaware of it, it's going to feel like someone else is controlling the speed and the pace that you go out for your whole life. But being aware of, you have control of the settings and you can slow it down, jump off, speed it up however you want, like run it your way. Thank you so much for your time on the podcast today. You have shared so much wisdom. If anyone is interested in working with Steph or finding her on socials, I will include all of her information in the show notes for you. Is there one place of the social media realm that you prefer to hang out on, or can people find you on multiple channels?
Usually Instagram. I'm all over Instagram.
You can find Steph at
Haze Counselling.
Thank you again, Steph. Been an absolute pleasure.
And that's a wrap on another episode. If this one resonated with you, I'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future conversations, and share it with someone else who's learning to trust herself again. You can connect with me on Instagram, Tash, where I share more about self-trust, personal growth, and human design. If you'd like to go deeper, you can explore my books and offerings, all designed to support you as you build self-trust and step into the next version of yourself with confidence. Until next time, please remember that you're not too much or too little. You're just you. Keep choosing yourself.